Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome all of you back to Ohio Exopolitics. I'm your host, Mark Snyder. Of course, I'm going to be covering the Meier information, but I'll also be talking about current events. We've had a really incredible occurrence. Trump has sent the military after Syria and Russia, and he's has struck Russian military in addition to the Syrians. I'm trying to make sense of all this and see where it fits into the bigger picture that the Meier information has given to us about what is going down. I mean, the Meier information has talked about two civil wars in the United States, one that will follow the other. It has talked about hurricanes, which we've gotten. It's talked about the firestorms, the incredible fires that we've seen in the West. And it talks about a time when automated systems will release chemical, nuclear, and biological weapons in the greatest disaster in human history. But those of you who have listened to this show know that I am a little less oriented towards the prophecy aspect of things and a little more focused on the spiritual material and the historical material and ancient technology and things like that. So let me try to, and I think it's so important to do this, it helps me anyway, try to put these things into perspective and to understand what's going on. Edward Albert Meier is 81 years old. He lives in a tiny mountain village in Switzerland, about 45 minutes east of Zurich. He lives in the pine forest in the snow-capped mountains of northern Switzerland. When he was roughly 3 years old, he started getting telepathic messages from a man named Svath. Svath was a human being, an extraterrestrial human being, that would land a strange silvery pear-shaped craft in clearings in northern Switzerland and would take Billy up into the ship and tell him who he had been in his previous lives. And Billy had been the people that we call today Enoch, Elijah, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Emmanuel, and Muhammad. But we also know that he's had previous lives where he wasn't a prophet. Lives like, I believe it was Aristotle, Socrates, Galileo, Mendelssohn, Mozart, Georg Faust, I believe his name was, an alchemist, and Rasputin, a Russian mystic faith healer. I know a lot of people that have a Christian background would listen to this and say, oh, this can't be true. There's no such thing as reincarnation. And this has got to be evil. This is demonic because it goes against my basic religion and basic belief systems. The Meier information has a different take on things. And if you look, I think if you're very, very honest with yourself, and you try to look and say, hey, you know, there's, 200 billion stars in our galaxy, and there certainly must be other worlds out there with life and people. The current perspective of the universe doesn't really, the current Christian and even other earth-based religions don't really have a way of explaining that. And I think that is because the religions here on the earth were created as a kind of control system. The Meier information is very, very interesting. It talks about something called the creation, the universal consciousness, which is really neither good nor evil. It's a spiritual energy, and it's an intelligence which radiates love. It radiates love much like the sun would radiate light or heat. It's neutral positive, and the Meier information explains the importance of thinking in a neutral positive way, and that's one of the creational natural laws. The first creational natural law of the universe, is the law of love. Not a romantic love, but an effective love, a love based on respect and reverence. The false love, the romantic love that most people pursue today, is very unstable, very temporary in nature, and it can result in anger and discord and many other things. The second creational natural law, according to Meier teaching, is the law of striving, that we all have to continually work to be happy. You cannot be happy if you're not focused and working towards something. And that something might be sweeping your back porch or cleaning out your garage, or it might be studying the Meier information. It might be going to get some exercise. It might be something, a study of some sort. We're here, the purpose of our lives, and this is where striving plays a role. The purpose of our lives is to evolve our consciousness, and that takes many, many lifetimes. You cannot evolve your consciousness in a single lifetime. You make progress, but you certainly cannot finish the process. So the religions that we have today have distorted this spiritual teaching, which really has been around for many, many years. Because, as I said, Svath told Billy who he had been in his previous lives, that he had been the people that we call Enoch, Elijah, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Emmanuel, and Muhammad. And there's been a huge attack on what we would call the religious teachings. And this goes for good reason, too, because there is an elite on the earth, and I think they're directly related to what the Meier material calls the Giza intelligences. And this is just more the Giza intelligences the Meier material talks about, but I relate them, it's just my personal point of view, that they are in some way an extension of the elite today. The elite today are supposed to be very satanic. I think the Giza intelligence probably created the Luciferian religion as well as the Christian religion and pitted the two against each other. And that's what we're seeing today, is this struggle of these two religions for dominance. I think eventually both of them go away because neither one of them work. Neither one of them really makes sense. Now, that's a very profound and heck of a statement to make, but I think if we look at religions, we see what has happened over the years. The Meier information says that we have what's called a spirit form. It's called a Geist form in the German, and it's like a spark of energy. It's a little tiny bit of fine matter, and it enters into the body of the child at 21 days. 21 days after the sperm fertilizes the egg, the Geist form comes in, and it goes into the middle of your brain in an area called the superior colliculus, which is what controls your sight and your hearing and your taste and your smell, and it's like the central part of your brain that coordinates all these different things. And the spirit form is your spiritual consciousness. It has all of the knowledge and the wisdom of your previous lives. If you look at, and there's so many examples out on the web, you can see this now, of children that have tremendous musical skill, musical talent, My opinion is that is because of the age of, and the wisdom of their spirit form in their previous lives. It makes it so much easier for them to relearn musical things, even if they say they may have been a great guitarist in a previous life and they play the guitar again, or they might play the cello in this life, but there's enough overlap that it allows them to come in with an advantage. There's also stories, a very interesting story, and I probably need to really get this book about a young boy who was in a fighter plane in World War II. That, I mean, he was in World War II, he might have been 20 years old or something when he was flying a Corsair off of an aircraft carrier called Potomac Bay, and eventually he was shot down by anti-aircraft fire. But this young boy, who was 4 years old, knew the name of the aircraft carrier, knew the name of the other soldiers on the ship, remembered clearly that his Corsair, which he remembered the name of, would get flat tires when it landed sometimes because it was such a heavy plane. He had clear memories of being shot down, and it wasn't genetic memory either, because he was in no way, none of his grandfathers or uncles or anything had been fighter pilots in the Navy in World War II. So, and it was, I guess the standard explanation from Christianity would be that it was demonic, but I think it's just that we're starting to understand more and more about the importance of the Meier teachings, because the Meier teachings, they are the closest thing we've got to reality. They're the best explanation for what exists in the world today. So we also have the responsibility, I think, of, as people that study this information, to look at it very intensely and to be able to pass this information on, because we're seeing the world fall apart. The way the Meier prophecies have explained every step of the way, we're seeing the world fall apart, and now we're walking closer and closer and closer to destruction. Assad, the leader of Syria, has no reason whatsoever to gas his people. The Russians and Assad had just about completely pushed ISIS and the terrorists out of Syria. But you're going to see on the mainstream media this whole story about, oh no, the poor children were killed, And evidently Trump doesn't have enough understanding or backbone to realize that he's being duped, or, as people like David Icke have said, he's part of the global elite from the beginning, from the get-go. So anyway, we're in a strange, very bizarre set of current events right now. It's a very, very disturbing thing to see the country decline to this level, to see it fall apart. At least we have the Meier teachings to fall back on, to understand how to control our thoughts and the creational natural laws, which I started the show talking about. First of all, is love, effective love, not romantic love. The law of striving, that in order to be happy, we have to be working, we have to be focused, we have to be striving. So many good reasons to be striving in many areas of your life. The third creational natural law is the law of harmony, and it's the law that requires us to have harmonious thinking. In other words, and it's more positive than people realize. We want to think neutral positive, but the characteristics of neutral positive thinking are that we're optimistic, we're relaxed, we're cheerful, we're enthusiastic, we're satisfied, we have perseverance, persistence, we're calm. So this is the way we should. Doesn't mean we're not seeing the negative. We're still balanced. We haven't become a quote-unquote outrageous positive thinker by any means. Remember, the positive and the negative are two things which belong together because they depend on one another. And if you try to separate the negative and the positive, then you'll go into what's called Asartung, which is a terrible pronunciation, but the notion is we'll be out of control of the good human nature. And despite what religion teaches about the sinful nature, we have a good human nature. It's very, very easy when people's thinking gets wrong for them to go into an out-of-the-control state. And so one of the things we've spent so much time doing on this show is learning to control our thoughts so that we do not fall out of control of. We do not allow our thoughts to drift for once. Good thoughts, neutral positive thoughts, produce good feelings. Good feelings produce good habits, and good habits lead to good circumstances in your life. Now, unfortunately, most people allow their thoughts to drift, unchecked on the ocean of conscious and unconscious intentions. So you're drifting. If your mind starts to drift, then unhealthy, wrong, negative, and destructive thoughts and feelings can come about. And that if you allow that, your body becomes more susceptible to illnesses and diseases. Your immune system becomes impaired. But if you have constructive thoughts, beautiful, happy, positive thoughts, then your psyche, your material consciousness, will stay in a good place. Now, on page 160, it says only a conscious or an unconscious purposefulness is able to bring thoughts to fruition. You have to have a purposefulness in your thoughts. Now, we're in a time right now when there's going to be a lot to be depressed about. So this struggle for maintaining beautiful, positive, happy, equalized thoughts is going to be really, really critical. The conscious mind is your awareness at the present moment. Sometimes we are said to have three minds: a conscious mind, a subconscious mind, and an unconscious mind. Your conscious mind is your objective or thinking mind. It doesn't even have a memory, and it can only hold on to one thought at a time. Your conscious mind will identify information, it compares information, it does analysis, and finally, it can make a decision. Now, you can have something called unconscious thoughts. Sometimes you also have what's called the subconscious mind or the preconscious mind. You can become aware of this information if you direct your attention to it. So that some of what is unconscious becomes subconscious and then conscious. Like when you have a long forgotten childhood memory which suddenly emerges after decades. The unconscious mind, it's sometimes primitive. It has instinctual wishes. The unconscious mind is a part of the mind that is kind of inaccessible by the conscious mind. In Freud's psychoanalytic theory of personality, it says that the unconscious mind is a reservoir of feelings, thoughts, urges, and memories that are outside of our conscious awareness. And many of the things in the unconscious are unacceptable and unpleasant. Things relating to pain, conflict, anxiety. And according to Freud, the unconscious continues to influence our behavior. and our experience, even though we are unaware of these underlying influences. The unconscious mind, you might think of as an iceberg. You know, you've got this little tip above the water and this gigantic area below the water. And what's your awareness level is only that which is above the water, but then everything underneath the water represents your unconscious. So the rest of the information that is outside of the conscious awareness is this gigantic iceberg under the water. And Freud believed that many of our feelings, desires, emotions are repressed and they're held out of our awareness. Why? Because a lot of times we don't want to deal with them. We don't know how to deal with them. And we have hidden desires and wishes, dreams, slips of the tongue, Freudian slips. So we, in our thinking, want to have a purposefulness, like a purposeful musician. We want to manifest a purpose. We want to enter a room with a purposeful look. A purpose is something set up as an object or an endpoint to be attained, an intention, an aim, or a plan. Now, the Meier information talks about a zeal, which is they refer to as a life determination. The intention or setting the zeal can thereby be completely conscious or also unconscious. I don't know how that works. I don't know how the unconscious sets one of these zeals, but it does. There has to be an intention for your thoughts to become real. So we have not only conscious strivings towards a zeal, but unconscious ones that are able to come to fruition due to the nature and the power of our thoughts. That's a stunning thing. Scary. That means there's a part of your mind that's below the surface of the water that you're not really aware of, and it's setting life determinations, and it has intentions. That's a little bit challenging. You know, we should help people to live. We should help the plants to live, the animals to live. There's an erroneous saying about live and let live. We should say live and help live. Here's a very beautiful thing on page 176 of the Might of Thoughts book. It says, the human beings who do not overcome their weaknesses and do not free themselves from the contents of all of their negative and destructive thoughts remain weak, wretched, and miserable. And I had memorized that for a while, and I would constantly say that to myself. Whenever I started to slip, I would say, but the human beings who do not overcome their weaknesses and do not free themselves from the contents of all their negative and destructive thoughts remain weak, wretched, and miserable. Another thing that the Meier information talks about is that we should renounce our selfishness because it degenerates into immoderate behavior. And selfishness and immoderateness must be dissolved and eliminated in order to discover our latent resources. This is on page 174 of the second edition. I have the second edition. It says, once a human being allows himself to be bewitched and impressed and persuaded and so forth by external influences, then he or she thereby oppresses his or her own will and self-responsibility and becomes dependent upon the external influences. Consequently, he or she directs his or her thoughts onto them and lets his or her thoughts increasingly spin until they control him or her. And he or she is no longer capable of his or her own creation of thoughts in a positive and equalized sense. So this is what I'm talking about as the rotation of the negative thoughts when they spin out of control and you lose your ability to think positive thoughts. Remember, you are the master of your own destiny. You are the creator of your own good luck, your good thoughts, good feelings. And remember, the feelings come out of the thoughts. The feelings are different than emotions. Emotions rage out of control. You want to allow your feelings to grow. Your emotions, not so much. Your emotions tend to get out of control quickly. Emotions are triggered by misdirected thoughts. And we've learned that by studying page 224, where misdirected thoughts trigger emotions that go from one extreme to another, can end up in murder or manslaughter. So we want to control our thoughts, keep them neutral, positive, and then we bring in good circumstances into our lives. Selfishness and immoderateness must be dissolved and eliminated in order to discover our latent abilities. Creational law, which states that no human being should simply leave the other to go on living his or her errors. Rather, each should help every individual live. That's one reason why I have this show. Is maybe this show can help you live your life and deal with all of the chaos that's coming. And it's already started. We've dropped 2,000-pound bombs on the Russian military. This is insanity. Either Trump was always on the dark side, or he has no backbone, no discernment whatsoever. I tend to lean towards him always being on the dark side. I give him the benefit of the doubt. I think if he's a millionaire, he's probably got some smarts, but who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. So in any way, creation law states that no human being should simply leave the other to go on living his or her own errors. Rather, he should help every individual live. Thus, the erroneous saying, live and let live, is in no wise valid. Rather, that which is valid is the word which says, live and help live. That means for both the oppressor as well as the oppressed. Human beings who overcome their weaknesses and free themselves from and can get rid of any content of their thoughts which is based on selfishness, imperiousness, egotism, overbearingness, greed, arrogance, haughtiness, and boastfulness, and many other things which are of the same kind or similar, are soon no longer included among those who are regarded as oppressors or oppressed. So once you get control of your thoughts, you are no longer oppressing people, or no longer are you oppressed. Now this is another thing I had memorized. It's really good. Page 176. It is the nature of the thoughts, by means of their might alone, every conceivable thing can be brought to fruition. If that doesn't convince you of the might of your thoughts, I don't know what will. If the human being does not begin to effectively control his or her thoughts, then she or he never gets into a position of really controlling his or her intentions and affairs. So, what is selfishness? Selfishness is being concerned excessively or exclusively for one's own advantage, pleasure, welfare, regardlessness of others, exceeding normal or appropriate bounds, inordinate, immoderate spending, immoderate laughter. The Om Phala Narada, which is another one of Billy's writings, says that the earth humans, they are prisoners of themselves and full of unrighteousness, ill humor, and selfishness, self-pity. The fact is that the creational natural laws and recommendations give their help and righteousness to those who are magnanimous, virtuous, studious, honest, and fair, because they alone evolve in the consciousness form according to the pre-existing striving and effective sense of life. So we have consciousness forms like love, wisdom, optimism, cheerfulness, discernment, logic. These are consciousness forms. And every incarnation, the consciousness form, these consciousness forms grow in knowledge and wisdom, and that advancement of this current lifetime is absorbed by the spirit form in the other realm, in the spirit realm, where we go after death. So your spirit form is absorbing the wisdom that you got from your previous life. And that's why we have many, many lives, because it takes many, many millions, even billions of years to get through these 7 evolutionary steps that every human society goes through. There are 2.6 million human societies in the Milky Way galaxy. And they all have the same 7 evolutionary steps because there is one universal mind that benefits from the knowledge and wisdom. When you finally get up through all these 7 evolutionary steps, your spirit form merges with creation. Now, what this became in Christianity was a heaven, where you go meet a heavenly Father. The universal consciousness has no personality. It's not a personification. There is no heavenly Father up there. Our dear universe has a universal consciousness. It is not a person or some personification. Now, this is contrary to a belief in God or a Father by various religions. This is an impersonal spiritual energy or power that we have here. It's not a God in the religious sense of the word. Well, folks, I'm going to leave you hanging right there. I'm very, very sorry. A lot of other forces taking place right now. I'm still trying to make sense. What has happened, what Trump has done, could lead to a World War III. I'm thinking that it won't yet, but we're getting closer and closer to some of what the Meier material has prophesied about. I hope to get more shows in the next couple of days, get more information out there for you. Hope this has helped you a little bit. A lot of information here. The Meier Thoughts is such a fantastic book. Sorry about the short show today, but I think it's probably in my best interest at this point. You've been listening to Ohio Exopolitics. I'm your host, Mark Snyder. Have a great day.